Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Over the next few years, the federal government will significantly reduce immigration, which experienced explosive growth in the post-pandemic era, drawing criticism for putting a strain on the housing stock and social services. Public support for immigration is waning, not just among Canadians across the political spectrum, but Canadian immigrants themselves. That's according to a new survey from Leger commissioned by Omni News, the first of its kind in the country focusing solely on immigrant perspectives. And the findings reveal the Canadian dream, once a goal for many, is getting further out of reach. I'm Caryn Ceolin, and today on The Big Story, I'm joined by Teresa Romano, Omni News reporter, to help us understand these results and what different immigrant communities across the country are saying. Teresa, it's such a pleasure to be speaking with you. Thanks so much for taking the time for this conversation.
Hi, Caryn. Good morning from Montreal, and thank you for having me.
So this is the third year of the Omni News Leger poll. Before we delve into the results, can you just explain a little bit to me about the survey and really its significance?
So as you said, this is the third year that Omni News decides to commission an exclusive Leger poll that specifically surveys respondents born outside of Canada. In this case, 1,510 people who have immigrated to Canada, to be specific, to understand their views on immigration levels, government policies, and integration challenges. Now, there are dozens of other surveys on immigration-related issues. This is specific, though, because our poll provides insight into the experiences, the challenges, and contribution of immigrants. It doesn't just talk about them, it gives them a voice.
You know, public sentiment in Canada has been that the immigration system is overwhelmed, that it's strained public services, it's sparked intense political debate. I just wonder, based on the results, if immigrants themselves share in this sentiment and how they may be feeling the impacts of what many have described as an overwhelmed immigration system in Canada.
This is actually one of the most interesting results, at least according to me. The fact that immigrants themselves are feeling the impact of an overwhelmed immigration system. I'm looking at the numbers. 67% of respondents say Canada should admit less than 300,000 new immigrants per year. 40% believe the number should be even lower, less than 100,000 per year. Now, let's keep in mind that the poll was conducted between October 2nd and October 15th. Therefore, before government released its new immigration levels at 380,000 permanent resident admissions from 2026 to 2028. So government is also drastically reducing its temporary population, consisting of temporary foreign workers and international students. So according to poll, and this is very interesting, immigrants believe that balancing immigration with housing, supporting economic growth, and ensuring fair applications should be the top priorities for Canada. It's surprising at first, but then if you think about it, immigrants themselves, they're facing some of the issues that the country is facing, right? So the housing crisis, a health system that's not always at the top, let's say. Therefore, they kind of want to preserve what remains, what's left of their Canadian dream. And that's why they want less immigrants.
I do want to ask you about the Canadian dream in a bit, but as you've just mentioned there, the federal government's latest budget includes these cuts to temporary immigration in particular over the next 4 years. Also, freezes targets for permanent residents. Those polled, though, what I found interesting, have not felt personally the effects of stricter immigration policies. I think it was like 1 in 10. But I wonder, as these new targets are rolled out and come into effect, whether you expect that proportion of people whose own families may be impacted will worsen?
That's actually expected because, first of all, policies are like, they take time to get into effect, and the effects themselves of their policies takes time to actually feel them. But already 1 in 10 is quite a number if you think about it, because considering that it's especially newcomers, meaning people that have been in Canada for less than 6 years. But then the effects like roll on to their family members and people around them. If you think of those elements, right, the fact that immigrants want less newcomers coming to Canada, but at the same time people feeling the effects, you might think that the two elements might be in contradiction with each other. They're actually not. Studies show that immigrants that have already settled into the country, they worked so hard to come here. They invested so much. So they want to preserve those rights, but at the same time, they feel the effects of what's happening. They feel the effect of the housing crisis, like we were saying before, of the health system. So at the same time, they feel what some people might call the rhetoric of, blaming immigrants for what's happening. It's a very complicated issue.
Mm. What are you hearing in light of these results? What are you hearing on the ground from the immigrants who you spoke to after, receiving these findings?
It's mixed. We interviewed somebody from the Philippines. She had a hard time getting her permanent residency in Canada. Her name is Grace Mastrada. She waited almost a decade to be reunited with family after moving to Toronto. At first, her application was rejected, but then she found a way to, she found the program, therefore she found a way to get her PR. But when she was talking about the subject, she still felt sad for people that are not in her situation, people that are trying so hard to stay here and they can't find a way. So she was part of the people that are not feeling the effect, but they feel compassion for other individuals that are in a very complicated and difficult situation. So it really depends, but we feel compassion, and they feel empathetic. And I find that when we talk to people, most people just want a chance to prove themselves, to prove that they can stay, even if they arrive here with a temporary status. They know it's temporary, but they also know there are programs, there are opportunities for them to stay longer in the country, and they want to have that chance to prove themselves. Like, we interviewed an Italian couple. They arrived here with a working holiday visa. They knew it was just for 1 year. They got renovated for 2 years. It's 2 years maximum. But they knew also there were certain programs that don't exist anymore. But at that time that they applied, those programs were still there. So they wanted to have a chance to stay here, prove themselves, and then apply for those programs. But now those opportunities are just not there anymore, and it becomes complicated. They made a huge investment in terms of money. They sold properties in terms of leaving behind people they loved, relatives, loved ones, friends, family. Then they get here, things change, programs get canceled, numbers reduced, and their life project is just not there anymore, doesn't exist anymore.
Have their perceptions of Canada changed? Like, do they think it was still worth it?
They do. And that's the part of the Canadian dream that's still there. I think it's 84, 83, but it's a big majority of people. They still think they made the right decision to come to Canada. It's just that the Canadian dream is changing, meaning a lot of them associate the Canadian dream with buying a house, which is not possible anymore for a lot of people.
For a lot of people.
Not just for immigrants. So housing crisis, cost of living made it very difficult for people to afford a house. So for most people, their Canadian dream is associated with buying a property. Most people think of Canada as a cold but welcoming place with lots of opportunities, but also with lots of houses or properties that you can actually afford. And unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. So it's changing. They're still happy, but they're also like reality collided for a lot of them with expectations. It's an adjustment.
I know, like, on the topic of home ownership specifically, that doesn't feel like attainable to a lot of people, as you were mentioning, not just immigrants. And, and when we think for decades, Canada was a top destination for immigrants. It was seen as, a stable place and a safe place to live with this clear path to permanent residency. But with so many newcomers who are already here associating that American dream with something as big as home ownership, do they feel that's still attainable for them, for the immigrants who are already here?
They don't. I think they feel the pressure as everyone else. It's just that maybe somebody who was born here has already a safety net, has already like family members that can help out maybe. But for somebody who just arrived from a different country, it's starting from scratch. That therefore is even harder to attain certain goals. Let's say that.
As you mentioned earlier, newcomers want Canada to admit even fewer immigrants than the federal government's revised targets. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about their perceptions of the Carney government's handling of the immigration file thus far, and what policies they think, need to change.
They're actually kind of okay with what the government is doing in terms of reducing, especially the temporary population. So, like we said, temporary workers and international students, because they think it's going to take a bit of pressure off the system in terms of housing crisis and in terms of health system and economic growth. So they're happy with those changes, but they're changes with consequences, like the labor market. We spoke with immigration consultant Alessandra Tias. She said it's not that foreign workers do jobs that Canadians don't want. It's that Canadians sometimes are not prepared for those jobs. They don't have the skills. She said, if you're a chef, you can be a lawyer and vice versa. And it doesn't happen overnight that you can change your skills. You can go back to schools and you can be prepared for those kind of jobs. So therefore, we need foreign workers to actually fill those positions that are very much indeed needed. But it's an investment, and some companies, after investing for a year, 2 years, they would like to retain those people because they are already trained, they already learned the job, they gained some experience, and now they just have to start from scratch. Employers and employees, some of them might have to go back. As for the employers, they would have to look for other people to fill those jobs. Now, it's a very complicated situation because while the government is trying to look at what kind of jobs, what kind of skills we need, and what areas of the country need more people, we're talking about human beings. We're not talking about just numbers, right? And that's where the problem is. It's like we're looking at statistics, we're looking at numbers, but we're also dealing with human beings that invested so much into coming to Canada.
Teresa, I wonder if you might be willing to share a little bit about your own personal experiences and based on your own personal experiences, whether there is a piece of data from the poll or finding that surprised or resonated with you.
I think it's the part about the Canadian dream. Well, my Canadian dream is a little bit maybe different than most people might think. I came here because I fell in love with the Canadian. So I was happy. I had a job. I was happy with my life in Italy, but then I fell in love and I came here. But thinking back, I always had a specific idea of Canada. Like we were saying, cold but welcoming place full of like nice and polite people, lots of opportunities to find a good job. If you work hard, you can actually prove yourself and advance in your career. And that's because I had relatives that immigrated here a long time ago, and every time they would come back to Italy, they would say how they made the right choice, and they were sincere. So when I arrived here, I actually found all that. I was happy with my decision, but my reality also collided with expectations. This time in terms of job barriers. So even though I was happy with what I found and I love the country, I still love the country, it was hard at the beginning. You had to gain Canadian experience. There was the language. There was the foreign credentials. At the beginning, it's hard, but eventually after I overcame those barriers, this country offered me the best opportunities in the world.
Based on that, is there anything from the poll that surprised you?
That surprised me. As I said, at the beginning, it's shocking, right? To think that immigrants want less immigrants. Then you think about it. And like I said, it's a huge investment to come here. And then you feel this, you hear this rhetoric of everything is falling apart because of too many immigrants. You kind of believe that and you want to preserve that. You want to preserve your situation. So, as I said, it was surprising at the beginning, but after talking to people, you understand their point of view. So no, that was the only thing that really surprised me.
Now that we have the results and we reflect on them, what comes next?
What comes next? As I said, this is not just data that we collected. The same way as immigrants are not just numbers, and they don't want to be treated like numbers when we talk about immigration. That's the main thing that everybody says when you talk to them. Regardless of their situation, they say we're not numbers. So the same way, this is not just data. We really hope that policymakers will actually look at those numbers and along with other studies, along with consultations, and trying to create policies that are actually grounded with reality, the reality of so many people that choose this country because it is a great country and they want to preserve it that way, right?
Teresa, I so appreciate your insight today and taking the time for this. It's such an important conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
And that was The Big Story. Please share this episode with a friend or someone you think might find it interesting. You can listen to new episodes of The Big Story Monday through Friday, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Caryn Ceolin. Thanks so much for listening.